There's a certain loneliness that doesn't come from absence, but from perception. Not from being without people, but from being unable to share what you see. A loneliness that lives not in silence, but beneath it. It's the kind of sorrow that doesn't cry out, but watches, waits. It walks with you through rooms full of people. It listens to conversations where everyone is speaking, but no one is saying anything. It smiles when others laugh, but feels the hollowness behind the laughter. This is the curse of awareness. It doesn't announce itself with drama. It slips in slowly, like fog. It lives in the pauses between words, in the way your body tenses during small talk, in the thoughts that follow you long after the noise has faded. It's the ache of noticing too much, with no one to notice it with. Deep thinkers often live this paradox. They are not aloof or cold. They are simply burdened by a different kind of attention. They don't just hear words. They hear the fear behind them. They don't just see smiles. They sense the fractures underneath. And the more they see, the more they carry. Quietly, invisibly, always. But where does this depth come from? It's not born in books or intellect. It's shaped by experience, by solitude that wasn't always chosen, by growing up asking questions no one wanted to answer, by witnessing contradictions too early and being told to forget what you saw. So they learn to observe instead of speak, to listen instead of interrupt, to stay on the edges, where it's safer to notice than to participate. And over time, noticing became second nature, a survival skill that turned into a lens that doesn't blur, it sharpens. But sharpness is a burden, because once you see clearly, it's hard to unsee, and what others move past, you absorb. Their avoidance, their pain, their patterns, their performance. You see the masks, and you wonder why no one else speaks of them. Carl Jung once said, "A man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them." And awareness brings you face to face with that inferno, not just in others, but in yourself. Because deep awareness doesn't just point outward, it turns inward. It exposes your own performances, your own contradictions, your own unconscious roles. It makes you question not only the world, but your place in it. And while others find refuge in certainty, you begin to live in a state of open-ended becoming. Not knowing, not escaping, just being, with eyes wide open. But this is not weakness. This is the beginning of real strength. Because to stay awake in a world that rewards numbness, to stay soft in a world that punishes sensitivity, to keep seeing, even when it hurts, is a quiet, radical form of courage. Awareness changes how you connect with others. When you see beneath the surface, it becomes harder to engage in the surface itself. Small talk starts to feel hollow. Forced laughter tastes bitter. You sit in a room full of people and yet feel like an outsider because your mind is tuned to frequencies others ignore. Deep thinkers crave authenticity, but they rarely find it. Not because it doesn't exist, but because most people are too afraid to go there. Vulnerability scares them. Depth exhausts them. So they cling to distraction, to certainty, to masks. And so much of social life becomes a performance, a dance of scripts and roles. What's real is buried beneath what's acceptable. What's true is replaced by what's easy. And when you show up with raw honesty, you're often met with discomfort. Not because you're wrong, but because you're breaking a silent contract. Don't go too deep. This makes it hard to form meaningful bonds. Conversations feel like choreography. Relationships feel like compromise. You begin to wonder, Am I too much? Or are they just not ready? Over time, this creates emotional distance, not out of superiority, but out of necessity. The more aware you are, the more sensitive you become. Loud environments overwhelm you. Superficial exchanges drain you. Even joy starts to feel fleeting, like trying to hold water in your hands. Beautiful for a moment, gone the next. So you retreat, not out of arrogance, but out of self-preservation, because in the noise you lose yourself, and in solitude you begin to remember. But here lies the paradox. While awareness isolates, it also expands your capacity for connection. Because once you've seen your own darkness, you're less afraid of someone else's. Once you've faced your own contradictions, you stop expecting perfection from others. Once you've learned to sit with your own silence, you become a safe space for others who are aching to be heard. Carl Jung believed that true empathy doesn't come from pity. It comes from knowing suffering, from surviving your own storms, and choosing, again and again, to stay open. Because the more aware you are, the more gently you hold others. You stop judging their masks. You start seeing the wounds underneath. You stop demanding vulnerability. You start creating the safety that invites it. And that's the strange gift of this burden. Your very sensitivity, once a source of pain, becomes a bridge. Not to everyone, but to those who've also walked through fire. So yes, awareness hurts, but it also heals. Not quickly, not loudly, but deeply. And the healing isn't just personal, it's relational. It ripples through the way you love, the way you listen, the way you choose presence over performance. Still, the ache remains. Because once you see clearly, you can't unsee. Once you wake up, you can't go back to sleep. And that awareness, that quiet, steady, unrelenting awareness, changes not just how you connect with others. It changes how you connect with yourself. The awareness doesn't just sharpen your vision, it magnifies your pain. When you see more, you feel more. And often that means carrying emotional weights others don't even notice. You observe the subtle power dynamics in conversations. You hear what's not being said. You feel the disconnect between someone's words and their energy. You see the systems, the dysfunctions, the hypocrisy, often before others even register that something is off. It's not a choice. It's not a skill you turn on and off. It's a state of being, a constant tuning in. But awareness is not a superpower without cost. It isolates. You find yourself unable to laugh at the same jokes. You can't find solace in distractions that once numbed the noise. You struggle to enjoy surface-level comforts that used to soothe you. Even celebration can feel hollow when you can't stop noticing the sorrow behind the smiles. You sit in a room full of people and feel completely alone, not because they exclude you, but because the conversation feels miles away from what truly matters. This kind of loneliness isn't solved by company. It's not about being surrounded. It's about being seen. And when your lens goes deeper than most, that kind of recognition becomes rare. You crave realness. But the world offers noise. You long for meaning, but get caught in loops of distraction. And the more awake you become, the more alien the world can feel. So you begin to drift. Not outward, but inward. You smile politely, but you're somewhere else. Not because you think you're above others, but because your inner world is louder than the one you're in. A single sentence can echo in your head for days. A passing glance can trigger hours of reflection. Some try to numb this inner tension through entertainment, through substances, through constant productivity, through overthinking disguised as analysis. But nothing truly silences it. Nothing truly soothes that ache. Because here's the curse. Once you've seen behind the curtain, no illusion satisfies. Once you've tasted truth, comfort can feel like a lie. And yet, this isn't a condemnation. It's a turning point. Because here's the paradox. The very thing that isolates you is also what connects you. Just not in the way you expected. Awareness is also sensitivity. It's empathy before words. It's recognizing heartbreak in someone's silence. It's holding space for someone's truth, even when they can't speak it. It's seeing the world not just as it is, but as it could be. But with that vision comes responsibility, not to preach, not to fix, but to carry that insight with humility, with compassion. Because if you let awareness harden you, it becomes bitterness. But if you let it soften you, it becomes wisdom. That's the invitation. To feel deeply without drowning. To see clearly without judging. To understand quietly without always needing to explain. Not everyone will meet you there. Not everyone will understand the language of inner depth. But someone will. And until then, your task is not to dim your perception. It's to learn how to live with it. To learn how to carry the weight without closing your heart. Because your awareness may never make the world easier, but it might just make you more whole. Not all awareness leads to suffering. It's how you carry it that makes the difference. When you begin to see more than others, when your mind becomes a constant observer, a scanner of nuance, a seeker of what lies beneath the obvious, the world starts to feel strange. You catch what others miss. You hear what others silence. You recognize patterns before they unfold. And the instinct, retreat. At first, that retreat feels necessary. It gives you space to breathe, to recalibrate, to exist without performing. You find comfort in solitude, in books, in silence, in ideas. It feels like protection. But stay there too long, and the boundary between solitude and isolation begins to blur. What once was a sanctuary becomes a cage, and what once protected you begins to hollow you out. Because the soul needs more than insight. It needs connection. Awareness is not just about what you see. It's about how you relate to what you see. It's not about becoming invincible. It's about becoming integrated. You can either use your awareness as a weapon or as a bridge. You can either judge the world for being blind or understand that everyone wakes up in their own time. You can curse the noise or learn to anchor yourself in silence even while surrounded by chaos. There is a strength in quiet observation, but there is wisdom in gentle participation. Deep thinkers often suffer not because they think too much, but because they haven't yet learned to hold their thoughts with balance. They mistake their sensitivity for weakness. They forget that the mind isn't meant to carry everything at once. Insight is a flame. If you clutch it in fear, it will scorch you. If you ignore it, it will fade. But if you nurture it, give it breath, space, and boundaries, it becomes something sacred. The pain of deep awareness doesn't come from truth itself. It comes from fighting the truth, from wishing others could see what you see, from expecting the world to reflect back the depth you bring to it. But here's the quiet secret. You don't need the world to change for you to live meaningfully within it. You need grace. Grace to observe without judgment. Grace to connect without expectation. Grace to be yourself, even if that self feels out of place. Schopenhauer once said, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone." But his solitude wasn't a prescription. It was a preparation. Solitude is where you find yourself, so that when you return to the world, you return as someone real, not as a mirror, not as a mask, but as a presence. And that's the shift, from suffering through your awareness to living with it. Your depth doesn't need to be a burden. It can be a compass, a gift, a light. But only if you stop expecting others to carry it and learn to carry it yourself with care. Because awareness, when tempered by humility, becomes wisdom. And wisdom, shared with tenderness, becomes healing. There comes a moment in every thinking person's life when the question quietly shifts. It moves from, "Why do I suffer?" to something deeper. What can I do with this suffering? This shift doesn't happen in a flash. It arrives slowly, in fragments, in sleepless nights, in long walks, in that heavy pause before you answer someone's question with a half smile, because the full truth is too vast, too layered, too real. And yet, in that shift, something profound awakens. You begin to understand that awareness alone is not salvation. You can see clearly, understand deeply, analyze endlessly. But without direction, that awareness becomes weight. It settles into your bones. It exhausts you. It turns insight into inertia, depth into despair, thought into torment. Because suffering that stays stagnant doesn't stay neutral. It rots. It curdles into bitterness. It hardens into cynicism. It whispers that nothing matters, that you'll always be alone with the burden of what you see. And so, a new question begins to rise from beneath the exhaustion. Is there another way to carry this? That question is the turning point, the quiet revolution. You begin to wonder not how to erase your pain, but how to shape it. Not how to numb your insight, but how to use it. Not how to belong by blending in, but how to serve by standing apart. This is where transformation begins. You start to ask, how can I turn what I've lived through into something useful? How can I speak from my wounds, not to be pitied, but to be understood? How can I build something from the debris of my inner world? And then you realize something almost sacred. Your pain was never pointless. Your loneliness, your disillusionment, your quiet ache for meaning. It was all preparation, raw material, fuel. The same awareness that once alienated you now becomes your bridge. When you share from your depth, not to impress but to connect, you open a door for others to go deeper too. Your story becomes a lantern. Your voice becomes a mirror. Your survival becomes a kind of soft rebellion against a world that thrives on silence. This isn't martyrdom. This isn't sacrifice. This is alchemy, turning pain into purpose. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. As Viktor Frankl wrote, in some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning. And meaning isn't just a thought. It's a verb. It's something you give, not just something you seek. You don't have to fix the world. You don't have to save anyone. But when you turn your gaze outward, when you ask, who else might be carrying what I've carried? The burden begins to lift. Not because it disappears, but because it expands into something shared. You realize you are not alone in your depth. And perhaps your awareness, your quiet noticing, was never meant to be locked inside. It was meant to become a gift. Awareness, in its highest form, is not about intellect. It's about presence. The deeply aware don't just think more. They feel more. They notice when someone's laughter doesn't reach their eyes. They catch the tremble in a voice that says, I'm fine. They sense what's unspoken, what's hidden, what others don't even realize they're carrying. And that kind of sensitivity, it's not decoration, it's responsibility. But it can be exhausting, because the more you see, the less you can ignore. You walk through life with eyes wide open in a world that often begs for blindness. You see the distractions people cling to, the illusions they mistake for purpose, the self-deception they need just to make it through the day. And you carry the ache of knowing. At first, that ache feels isolating. You start to wonder if something's wrong with you. Why can't you just enjoy the show? Why does everything feel so loud, so fake, so hollow? Why does your heart break over things others laugh off? But here's the paradox. The same awareness that isolates can also awaken. Because while awareness deepens pain, it also deepens meaning. It's the soil where wisdom grows, the quiet space where real connection becomes possible. Not connection built on performance, but on presence, on seeing and being seen. Still, awareness alone is not enough. If it hardens into judgment, it becomes a wall, a trap, a hidden ego dressed up as insight. That's why the real journey isn't just about becoming aware, it's about learning how to hold that awareness with grace, with compassion, with humility. Because the truth is, most people aren't shallow, they're just surviving. Numbness is a defense, denial is a reflex, and sometimes, what looks like ignorance is really just pain that never had a name. So what do you do with this awareness? You hold it like a lantern. Not to blind others with your light, but to quietly show a path. Not to preach, but to witness. Not to separate yourself, but to remember. Awareness is a bridge, not a throne. And maybe that's where the curse ends. When awareness stops being a private burden and becomes a shared awakening. But just as you begin to find peace in this deeper seeing, another question rises, unsettling, urgent, and often avoided. If so many suffer without knowing why, could it be that even the way we define goodness is a story we inherited? Maybe the next illusion to unravel is not about pleasure, pain, or even awareness. Maybe it's the idea of being a good person. Are you ready to question that too?